Although they have their own set of conventions, oral presentations have a lot in common with written communications like essays. One of the things that's similar between these two different forms of communication is the fact that each has three different parts. The beginning, in which you set the stage for what you're going to say, you establish for your audience what your topic is, and begin to make your case. A middle, in which you provide support for your case, as well as illustrations and evidence for what you're trying to say. And an end, when you wrap things up and you gesture towards the future. Open yourself up to new lines of inquiry. Let's talk about each one of these in turn. In the first part of a presentation, the most important thing to do at the beginning is to get your audience's attention, get them interested in what you have to say. The next thing to do is to ensure that you tell your audience what you're going to do. You want to provide something like a map for your presentation so that your audience knows where your presentation is going, what they can expect to hear in the next few minutes. You also want to clarify what your main point is, what the goal and purpose of your presentation is, what your takeaway message for the audience is. You may want to use a phrase that starts with something like, "What I would like to do today is something, something, something." In the second part of your presentation, the body, you want to focus on the main points that you want to get across to your audience. You can't talk about too many things, or else your audience will lose interest. So you want to stay really laser focused on the most important topics. What you want to do is to use signpost phrases so that your audience will stay oriented within your presentation. You want to make it clear when you're transitioning from one thought to another, when you're beginning a new idea, when you're quoting someone else, when you're providing a piece of evidence. And you want to use signpost phrases such as, "I'm now going to talk about," something like that, before you move on. You want, whenever possible, to make lists of what you're going to say. This can really help to orient your audience, and you want to use signposting phrases like, "First I'm going to talk about X, next I'm going to talk about Y," and so on. One thing that's important to consider when giving a presentation is whether and how to use visuals. If it's appropriate to do so, it's generally a good idea to include visuals in the form of a PowerPoint presentation or something like that, because it can really help your audience to get engaged and understand what you're talking about. But you want to be very choosy when you're using visuals so as not to detract from your overall focus. One of the most important things to do in the body of your presentation is to continually remind your audience about what the most important details of your presentation are. Use phrases like, "I want to stress this." Clarify what your takeaway message is. If something is extra important, try to return to it. Make connections between ideas explicit for your audience whenever appropriate. After you've finished making all of the main points in the body of your presentation, and it's time for you to bring things to a conclusion, make sure to recap for your audience what you covered and focus on some of the key details that you want them to remember. Make the final point of your presentation try to end on a strong note as much as possible. Don't introduce new information in your closing section, but instead gesture towards the future. Point towards some implications that your presentation has for what is to come. Make sure to thank your audience for their time and consideration. And if you're presenting in front of a live audience, make room for questions. Try to end on a strong note and not to just let things fall down with a thud. As you're entering the final section of your presentation, use a phrase like, "I would like to finish by discussing something, something, something." Make sure that you have some point that you want to linger in your audience's mind after the presentation is over. Make sure that you have your takeaway message clearly understood. Organizing your presentation into these three parts is valuable for all sorts of presentations. Whether you're delivering a talk in person, creating a video that will be viewed asynchronously, or giving a talk over Zoom. In all of these cases, you want to make sure that you have a clear beginning, middle, and end, that you gather your audience's attention, make it clear to them what your main takeaway message is, and you remind them consistently of what the point of your presentation is, what you want them to remember after the presentation is over.